I don't know if this is on, if everybody can hear me. Cool. I hope you had a good lunch. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the user experience of artificial intelligence. I won't be explaining technological stuff that much, but I'm talking about what end users are actually experiencing. And for me, AI is a very broad set of things, so let's not have that discussion, what machine learning or AI is. I see it as one for now. So I want to ask you guys, who remembers being a kid and dreaming about the future? Good, very good. For me, it was maybe something like this. I don't know if anybody recognizes that. What also was cool, in my opinion, was the hoverboard. So I want to ask you something else. Who was actually dreaming about this intelligent experience with machines, or something we could consider AI? It's a very practical thing. Well, if you did, high five, because you're at the right spot. You made it. You made your dream come true. So kudos. I'm Bart. I'm one of the founders of aFrogleap. We're an agency here in Amsterdam, and we do what we call innovative digital products. And it's very broad. And where we like to be with our clients is in the corner of the crossing point of innovation, experience, and technology. And if we do that, we can actually really help clients. We work for very cool clients, mostly in the Netherlands, but some abroad, and that's enough about that. We're part of Oxima Group, by the way, one of the bigger internet agencies in the Netherlands. And what I want to talk to you about today is the influence of users on artificial intelligence. So what do actual users have to do with this? And I'm not talking about the techie people who understand what machine learning is or AI is, but I'm talking about actual users using products in real life. And I talk to a lot of people explaining AI, and very often they say to me, help me understand what's going on here. And if we try to help them understand, we often use something like Pavlov, right? So you have the dog with the bell and the food, and if you repeat the process, the dog will learn certain behavior, which is very similar, and people understand the analogy. Another thing that also helps is talking about raising a kid. So if you have certain behavior, kids will realize that and also learn that behavior. So there's a natural understanding from people, users, for how this works. They can understand this. And they react with mixed emotions to the experiences that they have. So if you look at how people react to AI, sometimes they find it magical. And they have this feeling. For example, Microsoft released this iPhone application that you can kind of hold it up and it sees for you and it tells you what it does. It doesn't work very flawlessly, right? It's very limited. But it would now say people and empty chairs and a room and stuff. So it would be able to recognize stuff. And if blind people see that, they experience that and they find it reasonably magic. And most of you probably had some sort of experience with some product where you thought, this is really awesome. Some people find it scary. So there's this autonomous sentry gun which has to recognize people and then shoot. If depending on how you behave yourself. So this is pretty scary stuff if you think about it. Some people find certain stuff very weird. I don't know if anybody saw the demo of the new Google camera, which decides by itself when it makes pictures, which is something that is actually pretty weird if you consider that it has to know kind of what you like as a moment, and it has to learn from you. And so I'm very curious how it's going to happen. And very often people are like, whatever, they don't even realize there's an AI or machine learning process going on in the background. So they're very, I don't care what's happening. But with products, services, and experience that people love, they can get engaged. So for me, I love music, right? It's like I can spend whole days just listening to music. And I don't know if anybody here knows Discover Weekly and uses it. Show me some hands. Okay, that's quite a group of people. This is from Spotify. What they do is they make a list of 30 songs for you every week. They don't really tell you how, but they at least give you a list of music that you should like, probably. So this is really awesome, and most people are very positive about this. It's a very positive reviews and words around it. But very often these AIs make choices that users cannot entirely grasp. So if I look at the Spotify playlist, I don't necessarily know why they picked that music and why it's relevant to me. I know if I listen to it, it's probably pretty good, but I don't know exactly how it works. and I cannot give feedback on it. But me, as a true nerd, I start researching the web. I'm one of the million people who searches for how does Discover Weekly kind of work, and I find out there's all these patterns to how they can kind of group the things I like, and I find it very interesting, but I'm a very engaged person. There's also 99 million people who also use Discover Weekly who don't Google this and who don't know it. And sometimes you're not that engaged to what you see. So I was planning a trip, and I travel a lot, and I traveled a lot to like low budget and high cost hotels, and I was planning on Booking.com, and they have this top picks for you section where you get recommendations for you based on machine learning. Yesterday, great talk about it, but it doesn't necessarily tell me why they picked hotels. And since I have a very broad experience, I feel sometimes not very engaged with the results. And there's also not a way for me to say, hey, I don't like this hotel, or why do you show me this? This is the largest grocery chain in the Netherlands. They make this shopping list for you before you make it based on your behavior, but they don't really explain how it works. And if you throw a party and you buy all this weird stuff which you usually don't buy, it will come up this list as well, and there's no way to give feedback. So what I'm trying to say is that there are experiences where you don't know necessarily how AI works, and average users might say, that's fine, I'll accept whatever is coming. And ignorance can be bliss, right? Not knowing why it just works is sometimes very good. But us AI makers or future AI makers, we need to think about the future that we want, and do we want to include users in this loop of the experiences that we make? And since the discussion about AI has really taken off, and there's also a substantial set of negative or pessimistic views on AI, it's really important that we teach people a little bit about why things work the way they work. And it doesn't have to become technical, but it needs to become interesting. So as creators of AI experience, I think we need to be transparent and give a certain degree of influence to the users of these systems. Transparency for me exists out of two things. One, awareness, and the second thing that's very important is that you have a little bit of understanding why stuff is there. And the other thing is influence, and influence is all to do with feedback. Can I give feedback on a system? And if you're user-centric and you really think about your end user, this should be part of your creation process of what you're making. Why do we want to do this? Every user has a mental model of how a system is working. So whatever they're confronted with, they have an idea that they think they know how it works. And if there's some sort of learning going on behind it, they have this in their head. And when they interact with this system, based on the model they have, they influence future output. So it becomes kind of a circle. And these adjustments change how they interact again, and then it changes the model again. So you can kind of get a loop. So if their mental model of a system is not correct, you actually create a wrong flow of input. This is also a conspiracy theory around many AI systems, how they work. So what should we do? Well, if you look at it, there's transparency, which can be high or low, and then there's influence, which can be high or low. If you're a low transparency, low influence tool, it's very difficult to have engagement with that. So I don't know if anybody knows CAPTCHA, but CAPTCHA is a tool that you use to type in a few words. Nowadays, it goes fully automatic based on machine learning. But you don't really know how they decide that you're a robot, and you can also not give any feedback. So if you're stuck, that would be very weird. And if you're never stuck because it's always correct, why does this experience need to be there? Maybe a little bit more fun one is, how hot are you? This is a website, you get a rating of how hot you are. I put in my wife and me, and it just gives us a 7. If the 7 would be for me, I would be pretty awesome. If the 7's for my wife, I totally don't agree with it. But what's interesting is that I don't have a clue if it's about me or my wife. I also don't have a clue why we are a 7, and I can also not give any feedback, which would also be interesting to do. But that's a blind zone. If you go up, you go to the zone of paralysis, which is a low transparency and high influence. It's a little bit like going into a sound studio and you only want to adjust the volume, but you get all these buttons, and you don't know how to interact with it, you don't know how to give feedback. This doesn't happen in AI yet. There are no AI tools that give you too many ways to influence it and that you don't understand it anymore. And then the third one, which is a really important one, is the zone of frustration. So these are AI systems that give a certain degree of input to you that you know that you're in a learning system, and there's a certain amount of understanding what happens, but you cannot influence it. So what I was talking about, Discover Weekly, people understand what's going on a little bit. They don't know exactly how it works, but you cannot give any feedback to it. So if you're doing it right, you're actually in the middle. You're in a trajectory to maturity. And I'll hold it on for a little bit until everybody made a photo. But what's interesting, if you're in that zone, you actually have the right amount of input to people to show them what you're doing, which you don't always have to do. And you also give them the right amount of feedback that they're included in your AI learning process. The most valuable AI systems evolve over time with these mental models of users. So you need to continuously think about your next step. If you're very immature first phase, you don't need to have that much learning or influencing. So what would this mean in real life? Well, we made a hypothetical news application with a My News section based on my user, my relevant news from me. So if this would be non-explanatory, I would just have some news, and I would be like, okay, this is pretty good. It kind of fits with me. I read serious news, but why is Victoria Beckham kind of number 2 here? I don't understand that, right? So I would go on, I would read the article and not become that much wiser and still think, why do I get Victoria Beckham news? It doesn't fit with me. If you want to make it more transparent, you could say, why don't we first start with explaining a little bit how this works? So on the top right corner, you have a little eye, and this eye is kind of explaining you what's behind there. So if you click there, it shows you how does it work. Well, we learn from your behavior and from similar people. Do you maybe want to see with every article how we do this? And do you maybe also want to give a little bit of feedback in the bottom of every article? So if you turn this on, you see some tags at the bottom of an article, which gives you some insight to why it's there. And then it says, okay, Victoria Beckham philosophy. You read the article again maybe, and you kind of find out, okay, she's compared to Karl Marx. Okay, I read some stuff about philosophy. Now it makes some sense. Do I want this again? Thumbs down. I don't want more philosophy. So if you give this influence, you can get people to get engaged, and you can learn your system a little bit better with people in the loop. So who's doing this right? Netflix. For example, if you go to Top Picks from Me, which is a recommendation based on machine learning, there's a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of experience there, which is great, because if you click on one of those, you get this little bit of feedback on what's going on and how it's learning. And you have a feeling as a user that you're part of this learning experience. Google is also doing this pretty right. With once in a while they ask on Android phones with cards, is this useful for you? Not all the time, sometimes. But even better is this keyboard that they make. So there's a language switcher, and people switch from languages all the time in messaging, and it's learning, right? It's a machine learning process. But by default, as a user, because you're switching, you're giving it really good feedback. So in this system, it's really inherent that it's kind of possible, and this is really cool. And what happens if we fail to create transparency? Well, to wrap it up, people will start playing around with systems and actually try to hack it in their own way. Self-driving cars with pedestrian detection, and then it ends up that the car didn't have the pedestrian detection, so the user thought it was actually smart, but it wasn't smart. So there was no insights there. People who try to confuse self-driving cars. I don't know if anybody knows Amazon personal pricing, which is also a learning system. People try to hack the system so they get the lowest prices based on the idea that they have how these prices are formed. Very interesting. And if they start manipulating outputs, I don't think your learning system will become that much smarter. So what do I want to give you? First of all, I think I said this enough. Try to include some transparency and awareness that you're actually building and that it's there. Not every system needs this, right? If you're entirely in the back end of a system and the user has nothing to do with your learning, you don't have to do this. And if you have something that people actually experience, try to give them a little bit of influence. Feedback loops are very interesting for a lot of front-end AI experiences. And then again, user perception of intelligence continuously changes, right? So kids grow up, they will naturally learn this, and they will naturally start playing with this kind of systems, and they will learn with the system. So we need to be aware that there's a whole generation coming now that expects that a system is smart. I hope you also keep dreaming like kids, and that you keep being aware of the fact that you can build your dreams right now. We're in a pretty awesome age. And at aFrogleap, we try to help clients kind of fulfill these dreams, right? So we try to help them ideate what kind of learning experience they can make, and then we try to experiment with them and make users aware of what they can do and learn also from users with them. So I hope this helps you out. If you have any questions or if you need help with anything, you can email me at bart@afrogleap.com, and I hope this helped.
Well done, Bart. It was a really, really good presentation. Thanks. I was hoping that also the latter part of your presentation was followed by everyone, because I did see a number of people trying to find the website How Hot Am I?
Yeah.
You know, to see what the ratings were.
Who had like an A+? Put your hand up.
A lot of people in the back, I see,
here.
and some here, some here as well.
I'm curious how the AI works for How Hot Am I?
So I will definitely test my own score later on, but I was engaged by your presentation. One of the things that I do like to ask you, so do you also think that no feedback means no success, or can something be so intuitive that I'm fine, I'm not frustrated, I'm not in that zone that you mentioned, I'm just happy with the service you provide me?
I think there are definitely scenarios where your system is in such a way that feedback doesn't have any added value for a user. So if you user test it and there's zero frustration, then you don't have to add a feedback loop necessarily. But many systems, Google is one of the first ones to really embrace this. They try to include feedback loops in every system. Why? So their system becomes smarter, because users kind of adjust the behavior a little bit. So otherwise it's a closed loop, and it's only the system learning from what we call observed behavior, and there's also declared behavior, and there's a difference for users. So I think very often it can make a positive impact on your system.
So it's also about designing for network effects, right?
Yeah.
It's about structuring your business model.
Yeah, it's lots about the interaction also, and sometimes it's also just necessary so users don't get frustrated, but it doesn't really help your system, right? So there are many reasons to do this in the right way.
Okay. Thanks. Any other questions from the floor for Bart before we continue? Yes, I see a hand there in the back. Can we please get a microphone to the gentleman? Don't throw it. Yeah, you'll be all right.
Yeah. Hi. My question is, how do you keep people on track? So as I understand it, you interact with your AI system, and you kind of expect the customer to take a certain journey throughout all these decisions, but you don't want them, on the one hand, to make no decisions at all, but on the other hand, you don't want them to over-decide or to over-get in the system.
Yeah.
So how do you keep customers around the track that you plan them to have?
I think you have to choose, right? In certain systems, you just want a kind of hidden feature where you can give some feedback. In many recommendation sites, you have you click on extra details and you're not interested. So it depends. It depends on your system. If you have there are not many AI systems that only give you one thing, and then people have to go on with it. But if that's the case, it's really important to sometimes give them the feedback. Did this help you or not? But you have to keep them going, right, in general. So you don't want to stop them from the journey that they're in. If you have a different system where you have multiple solutions, then it's really interesting if people can also have some feedback on, hey, this is good for me, this is not good for me, and that just kind of is a new learning flow for your system. So it really depends on the system. There's very few systems that have one linear flow, but then you definitely don't want to take people out. Although your output might not be always correct, you still want to go through with it, because usually your system is built in a way that it will learn from that experience. So there's a lot of inherent learning in regular systems where people will either use it or not use it. That's also, of course, learning. That's observed learning. This is what we call more like an above the line kind of, people will actually have physical feedback or a real moment where they can give some feedback. So yeah, I hope that helps.